Hello everybody and welcome back to War Thunder. It looks like there's going to be a number of changes in Ground Forces maps because Gaijin has written an article about these changes, including screenshots and also descriptions of what they have done to change said maps. And there's been a number of changes on various maps. So I'm going to try to show you guys what they are by showing you a comparison of some screenshots that they have provided along with what it's like in the game currently, because I don't have access to a development build, so this is the best that I can do. Right, we're going to start off with Cuban here. So they've said, we have done massive work on the entire western part of Cuban. We have smoothed the general topography of the landscape, resulting in more fluid vehicle travel, as well as removed the hill in the northwest part of the map. Now there will be a ravine that you can cross without having to detour instead. So looking at the screenshot and just what Cuban looks like at the moment, I guess there is a lot of hill formations on the western part of the map, and especially towards the northwest. And I imagine that the detour that they were talking about was this hill over here, because if you noticed, it actually kind of protrudes outwards, outwith of all the battlefield. You have to go all the way around here, around, and then you eventually come to the opposition side if you spawn from that location. And if you want to try to cross the hill, then chances are you might end up getting hit and killed. So I imagine that this is what they're talking about, and this is the ravine that they have implemented into said change. And that's actually one I could welcome, because it is kind of outside of the map itself. So they said, we have also added a stone shelter on a hill overlooking the lake, which will allow tanks with high profiles to fire at the enemy crossing the path and still be partially protected from enemy attacks. So I imagine that they're talking about this lake over here, considering it's the only lake, and they added in a rock formation along the side here, which will probably allow you to shoot at enemy tanks that are coming from over here, which will be a ravine, and it'll be more exposed for the enemy that tries to come in this direction so that they can be shot at. Now I hope that maybe this would be the same on this side as well, so that you can fire at enemies crossing that path, because if it's only one direction, then that might be a little bit unbalanced, but we'll have to see what comes out of that. And finally they say, among other things, we have marked rough slopes with rocks that will allow players to see a steep descent much earlier, rather than when the player is too close to avoid the danger from it. So I have a feeling that they're probably talking about the addition of descents earlier, closer to the spawn points, rather than maybe more towards the middle of the map, where if you try to like climb over a hill and then you go down it, but at that moment an enemy tank pops out, then you're left kind of exposed. Maybe that's what they mean. But okay, that is it for Cuban changes. Next up is Corellia. They say the mountain near the northern airfield has been modified to allow easier access to aircraft for landing. I have a feeling that they're probably talking about this slope right here, because as you can imagine, coming down onto the airfield would be a little bit on the difficult side, considering how steep the descent of this slope is and how much harder that would make it to land your aircraft. So I imagine that that is probably a lot more flatter, or there might be a gap so that you could actually go and land your aircraft on that airfield much easier. However, the main focus of the map was to improve the ability to perform a greater variety of tactical maneuvers using ground vehicles. For this reason, we have created a fork in the road from the eastern area of spawn. This is actually quite a welcome change in my opinion, because this is where they've changed the area, and now there will be a road that goes up onto here, which is a very nice change, because there's a lot of scenarios on Corellia where you have to capture, say, a point just over here, and that's the only point for capture. And so that leaves the team that spawns in coming from this direction with kind of like a choke pointish area. Like they have to be choke pointed here, funneled into this place, or they can try going on top of the hill, but that's still only two areas in which they can go. And so having this third option of going on top of the hill in this area just gives much more tactical possibilities of shooting the enemy from this vantage point up here, rather than being funneled down there. We have also added a convenient pathway to the central elevation from the northwestern spawn point. By that, they mean the spawn point just over there, and by what they changed, I think it is actually this right here. It looks like they have smoothened this section out and connected it to the pathway, so now you have two ways to get up to the hill from this location, either through here or which will be through here. Now these are quite welcome changes in my opinion, because Corellia actually suffers with quite a lot of unbalance depending on the scenarios. So I hope that these are gonna bring more balance to it. But then again, I think it's more of a problem with the scenarios themselves rather than actual map changes, so to say. With Mostock, we are working to change the topography of the map in order to achieve a better balance for a variety of the game modes. To do this, we have altered the terrain of western and central capture points used in arcade mode, as well as the southern capture point, which is used in realistic battles. The changes are designed to equalize the chances of victory for both teams. Now this is a very welcome change in my opinion, because I can't speak for realistic battles, but definitely in arcade, the southern capture point is a bit ridiculous, because if you try to capture it, then you're gonna just die, because the way that's situated is that enemies on the hill either here or on the hill here can freely, near enough freely, shoot at the enemy tanks that are trying to capture that point, and those enemy tanks that are trying to capture that point have near enough no cover to work with. On the central point, I feel like it's a lot more favored for people spawning up north, whereas the ones that are spawning from this direction that I'm pointing at right now have a bit of a harder time to capture it, because they have to work around these hills, and once they're actually on it, then they can easily take fire from enemies that are located on the hills around this location. Now the northern capture point is located around here, and this one is quite off the side. Now whoever is actually capping the point actually has a little bit of an advantage, because any enemy teams that are trying to cross over the hills, first off, if they don't have the gun depression, they're going to have to try to expose themselves if they want to hit the person that's capping the point. So the person that's capping can just easily put some shells right into their belly if they so wanted to. So again, I hope that whatever change that they're actually making is going to equalize it for the teams, so that, you know, whoever's trying to come in won't take shots into the belly that easy. Next up is Eastern Europe, and they said, we have made a lot of different changes for the Eastern Europe map. We redesigned many areas of the city, added many unique areas and squares, as well as improved performance on the map. Improved performance definitely sounds nice, because sometimes on some of these ground force maps, the FPS toll that your computer takes is so much greater than it is in like an Air Force battle. But anyway, I can already tell right off the bat, comparing it to the screenshot, that there's been a number of changes. For example, this area here is much more open. A number of the buildings have been taken away. The fence line has been extended, and I imagine that just allows you to fire down that street right over here. And also, it seems like a number of buildings in this location were changed around, just making it a little bit more open and more opportunities to flank, I imagine. And last but not least, they've shown a screenshot that shows this area being completely bulldozed. All the buildings are gone. It's much more rough terrain, and there's some trenches located in there. Alright guys, so that's it for all that they talked about in the article. It's nice of them to have written an article about the map changes in the game. One thing I could maybe recommend is maybe if they talk about the rationing of why they made the map changes, then that would be quite nice, because then at least those players would understand what they're doing, and we could also give them feedback about any changes that they're making or any future improvements. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, then make sure to hit that like button. But until the next one, this is Krebs, and I'll catch you guys next time.